Hey guys, welcome back to Econ Time with SK. So grab your notebooks, your favorite cup of coffee, and let's get started. In this video, we're going to be looking at the concepts of fixed cost. So sometimes you write it as total fixed cost. We're going to look at total variable cost. We're going to look at total cost, and then we're going to be looking at the average counterpart. So average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost. All right. And of course, we've got marginal cost there always. Next, we actually are going to look at the different types of costs. So the cost structure of a firm. So this is the different types of costs that is faced by the firm. And I just want you to know that, all right. So this is also, let's just call this the total fixed cost. This is the total variable cost. We've got the total cost here. So what is the total fixed cost? Total fixed cost is essentially, it's a short-run concept, okay? So first realize that this whole table that we've got here, it's actually dealing with the short run. Why? Because only in the short run do firms have some inputs that don't change as you increase quantity, okay? In the long run, there are no fixed inputs, so there's no fixed cost. In the long run, all inputs can be changed. Remember the example of the carpenter, and in the short run, he was actually trapped or bound by an annual contract. So he had rented the factory space for a year and he had to continue paying rent. Okay, but in the long run, he can actually move on to a bigger factory. He can actually stop renting this particular place. So there's more flexibility in the long run. So, okay, so coming back to this short run concept, the total fixed cost. An example of a total fixed cost would be, I guess, rent that we just mentioned, rent of the factory space. And so notice this interesting thing about the total fixed cost is that output is increasing, but there's actually no change to the amount of rent that's being paid, right? So that's why total fixed cost is actually remains constant at $100. And the reason that is fixed is because you're trapped into a short run contract or something like that. You're not flexible as a firm, and so you can't just go and rent extra factory space or just leave this factory space, get a new one. You can't do that. So what I'd like to point out about fixed cost is that it does not change with the output. That's the key. It does not change with the amount of production that the farm is doing. Total variable cost, on the other hand, is something like the wage of labor, right? It can be the wage of labor. Now, when you add an extra worker, your variable cost actually goes up. So if the wage is $20, then your variable cost would go up by $20. So that's why we are seeing here that as you increase production, variable cost actually increases as you increase quantity. Fixed cost actually remains unchanged as increased quantity. So total cost is at the fixed cost plus the variable cost. So total cost also, you can see it is constantly increasing as the quantity increases. So before we go on to the average concept, let me just show you the curve that is associated with these total cost concepts. So right here, we've got all the different types of total cost curves. So on this axis, I've got costs. You can also just write down TC, TVC, TFC, but it's just really it's capturing the different types of costs that are there, right? Okay. The first thing I want you to notice is the fact that this total fixed cost curve, right, it's a horizontal line. What this horizontal line means is that whether the firm produces 0 units, right, or it produces 5 units, or it produces 10 units, every single time the cost incurred by the firm is $100. And this is the concept of rent that we were giving an example of. Let's say the firm, it's COVID and the firm decides that I'm not going to produce anything because I can't sell it or I can't ship it. If it even reduces the production to 0, even then it will have to pay rent on the factory space, right? So that's why it's a horizontal curve, capturing the fact that whatever amount you're producing, you are still paying the same amount of rent. Okay, fine. Then we've got the total variable cost, and that in the table above, we show that, hey, you know what? This actually increases as production increases. And the total cost is really just a combination of the total fixed cost and the total variable cost. That is why you see how here the total cost actually does not start at 0. So let me write that down. The total cost does not start at $0. Why? Because total cost is a combination of total fixed cost plus total variable cost, right? So even at Q equals to 0, total cost is actually equals to total fixed cost, which is $100, plus total variable cost, which is $0. And so it is $100. So that is why total cost at 0 units of output starts at 100 and then just mirrors what's happening with the total variable cost. Now, notice something. So if I draw the slope here, all right, and the slope should be a tangent to the cost curve. All right, so what do you see here? The slope is actually initially getting flatter. So let me just write that down. Firstly, let's write down what is a slope. So here, slope of the total cost curve is actually equals to change in total cost by change in Q, right? That's because we're basically doing change in Y by change in X, right? Okay, so maybe it would help you guys out more if I wrote that, all right? So let me just first break it down for you. So this is change in Y by change in X. And so what is on the Y-axis? It's actually the y-axis captures all the different costs. So because we're dealing with total cost, we're just going to say, hey, you know, what is the change in total cost divided by change in X? Well, on the x-axis, we've got quantity. So it's going to be change in Q. Oh, wow. Look, this is a concept we've seen before. This is nothing but the marginal cost curve. So what we've established here is that slope of the total cost curve is marginal cost curve. That's point number one. Now, as I mentioned about the slope, we saw that initially, before X, slope of total cost curve gets flatter, right? It is going from being very steep to being quite flat. Well, if it gets flatter, that means that slope is falling in value, right? It is going towards 0, which means that the slope of TC, which is nothing but the marginal cost, is actually falling. So what I'm trying to say is if I were to draw the marginal cost curve, all right, so let me just trace it down here. Well, we're seeing that before X, the marginal cost is actually falling. Now look at the case where we are going after X, all right? After X, what happens to the slope of the total cost curve? So let's just go back to our curve, all right? And what we are seeing here is after X, okay, wait. After X, it actually gets steeper. So we're seeing that the green lines are getting steeper. So let me just come back and write it here. Slope of total cost gets steeper, which means that value of the slope is increasing, which means that slope of total cost, which is actually the marginal cost, is increasing. So if I were to draw this here, well, you know what? In this part, as your slope is getting steeper, it means marginal cost is increasing. This is what the MC curve will look like. So again, if I were to ask you, hey, why is the total cost curve shaped like a wave, right? So what we're seeing is that before X, total cost is actually increasing at a decreasing rate. And after X, total cost it's still increasing, but at an increasing rate. And if we ask you why, so basically the question I'm asking you is why is total cost shaped like this, right? So why is it like a wave? What is going to be the answer? Well, some people pointed out that, hey, look, the total cost looks like this because it's linked to the marginal cost curve, and the marginal cost first decreases and then increases, right? So some people said, well, it's due to the marginal cost curve first falling and then rising. But the question is that why is it that the MC curve first falls and then rises, right? And to answer that, we go back to the key answer, which is what? The law of diminishing returns, which is basically decreasing marginal product. Okay? Now that we are done with the behavior of the total cost curves, in the videos that follow, we shall be looking at the behavior of the different average cost curves. Alright guys, I shall see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.